we need to also take care of ourselves and take responsibility for our mental well-being and our physical well-being. And we can't do it all. That's just like realistically the truth. And so if you are balancing a 9 to 5, if you are trying to grow something on the side or just wanting to incorporate more hobbies, be sure to also prioritize rest.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the 20s Detox podcast. I have an amazing guest today, Camille. She's the host of her own podcast called Fulfilled, where it's about living more authentically with purpose and a fulfilling life. We're so excited to chat today because honestly, Camille lives in New York, and I definitely feel like I just want to pick her brain about the hustle that she must be experiencing because I live close to Toronto, but I'm not in the city. And I can only imagine what it means because she's also a yoga instructor to have that balance and to constantly be subjected to that kind of energy while also trying to stay centered. And we're also both going to be talking about the reality of the fact that a lot of us still have 9 to 5s, have our day jobs while we're trying to make our little side hustle, our passion, like a thing. So without further ado, welcome Camille to the podcast.
Bianca, thank you so much for having me. And everything you said is so real. It's one of my favorite conversations, and I can't wait to dive into it. Let's get real.
Wonderful. Okay, so I have to start with the fact that both of us had our birthdays last week.
We were just sharing how we were twins. We're one day apart.
We're literally a day apart.
Day apart,
Pisces
Pisces.
energy is has entered the chat, seriously. Before we get into it, I just wanted to ask you because my last episode was all about like my yearly reflections. And I don't like to do New Year's resolutions personally. I just find it like too much pressure. But always around my birthday, something comes up being like, I am a year older and I feel like there's one thing I can take from my previous year. Do you have anything that comes to mind right off the bat?
Honestly, one big thing that I think this year, entering 27, how old are you turning? Did you turn?
I turned 26.
Okay. So I don't know if you know about like Saturn return at
Yeah.
27. So I just entered it, I guess. So I keep hearing. And to be quite honest, it's very aligned with what I've been experiencing in my life lately. I feel like, honestly, this year, the theme is just change. Like, I think there's just a ton of change in this upcoming year for me. Stay tuned as to what that's going to look like. I'm still staying tuned as to what that's going to look like, but I just have kind of been going through this thing where I know on the other side of this is immense change. And I just happen to have turned 27 also, and I know that that's a big part of Saturn return is like massive transformation in life. So, you know, I think change is a huge thing that this year is going to bring. In terms of things that I'm taking from 26, gosh, I feel like I'm taking always like constant lessons, you know.
Same,
So I
same.
think like I'm always trying to grow and improve and bring those things that I'm constantly learning into the next chapter and tell myself that every single difficult thing that we experience, like it's here to teach us, it's here to guide us. It's a huge thing I like to talk about. But yeah, this year, like the first thing that came to mind is change. And I think change for the best. Like change can feel difficult and hard to navigate at times, but I know that this change that's coming is going to bring about great things.
I love that. Change is something that is not always easy to go through, even if it's great. I was having a realization myself the other day because I'm also going to have a lot of change this year. And sometimes you might second guess yourself if it's the right thing, because in your body, you're like, what is even happening?
Yeah.
But I think if you constantly are like connected with what you want in life, you're like, no, this is where I need to go. Like, this is what I need to do, even if it doesn't feel great.
100%. And change doesn't come without discomfort, right? Without that uncomfortable transition and without unfamiliarity. But that's a part of it. We forget that that's how we grow. That's how we grow into the best versions of ourselves. And that's not, as you mentioned, what we see on social media. Like, we don't see that discomfort. We don't see that difficult transition that person went through before accomplishing all that success.
100%. When you started your podcast. How was that adjustment for you when you were still working? Because I feel like that my podcast was something I thought about. I was on a Europe trip with my friend. I was telling her, and it's the same friend who, like, we have these conversations all the time. She's also a Pisces. I think we constantly are like gravitating towards meaning in
Yeah.
life. Like we need meaning. We don't want this like stable life the whole time because there's more to it. And I was telling her in Europe, I really think that I need to do a podcast. And she's like, why not? Like, just do it. Whenever I travel, I feel like I connect back to a part of myself that is all about like creating. Like, you're surrounded by so much art, different cultures. I'm just curious to know what brought you to wanting to create a podcast of your own.
It's similar to your story. I had this kind of gut feeling that came up. I think I saw this piece of content that was like, if you've been wanting to start a podcast, this is your sign to just start. And I saw that video, and it's something I've always wanted to do. And I told myself it was something, oh, I'll do that in my 30s when, the time is better and I've, financially made it. Maybe I've like left my corporate job at that point, blah, blah, blah. We often tell ourselves to wait for a perfect time, but what we don't realize is there's no perfect time to start anything, because sure, there's obstacles in your life right now, right? Like, you have a full-time 9 to 5. Maybe you're scared of judgment from your friends because maybe you're in your 20s and still navigating those insecurities. But think about later in life. Okay, maybe you're going to have a family. When are you going to have the time to do it then? Like, there's always going to be a reason not to, and always going to be obstacles to prevent yourself from starting. But the second that gut feeling arose, I kind of tried to shove it back down. I'm like, now's not the time. Like, go away. Like, I don't need that in my life right now. I'm already busy. I feel like that would, whatever. And it just kept coming up. And then, similar to you, I sent my best friend Emma a voice memo, and I was like, or a text or something, which I got to go back and find because I feel like it's monumental. And I was literally just like, I can't shake this feeling that I want to just like start my podcast. And literally, like, from that week on, I just started, and I took one step in front of the other, and I literally Googled like how to start a podcast. Like, I didn't know. And now I feel like, you and I obviously like very much know what we're doing. We're like very much into it. But when you start, it's terrifying, and you just have to put one step in front of the other. Literally Googled how to start a podcast. I invested in a mic. I literally started recording in my walk-in closet because it was good audio. So I found online. And I was recording into my, actually, I take that back. Before I even bought a mic, I was using my iPhone to record because they're like, iPhones actually have great recording quality. I tell myself that looking back at those early days, I'm going to just like feel so nostalgic and think that was so cool and special because I had like 0 listeners. I was in my walk-in closet, like recording into my iPhone by myself. Like, what a weird, funny low point and way to start. But also, like, that's how anyone starts, right? You think of these massive companies, for example, didn't like Microsoft and Apple like started in like a garage, like it's so cool to think about the fact that everyone just starts somewhere. And no matter what phase in life you're at, you can take that first step to start that thing you want to do. And circling back to your question of starting it on top of a full-time job, it's really hard. So I have the podcast. I have a full-time finance job in New York City, and I teach yoga. And on top of that, I also try to not isolate myself, and I see friends and I volunteer, and
Yeah.
it's a hustle, right? Like, it's really a grind. But the alternative in my mind is settling and not going for the thing that I truly know I'm meant to be doing and the thing that I truly want to be doing. And especially in our 20s, what that means is doing it on the side and balancing these things and trying to make it work in any capacity that you can. And it's unrealistic to think that like you can just quit your job and then suddenly you're going to have like that successful thing. That's unrealistic. The realistic way to start to take steps to live a more fulfilling life or chase your dreams is take one step at a time. Do it on the side. Start by getting curious as to what that thing might even be by trying things outside of work. Like maybe go for that teaching certification if you want to teach yoga. Maybe try recording a random podcast episode, or maybe like join that singing class, or like whatever it is that like your heart is being drawn to. incorporating those things outside of a 9 to 5 not only adds so much fulfillment into your life, also without realizing it, you start to just take steps towards your dreams, like slowly but surely, and finding more balance and fulfillment in life rather than just putting all that pressure on one job or one thing, you know?
Oh my gosh, 100%. Now, as I've been doing this for a few years, there's some people that are like, how did you do this? Like, what are some points that you have? And a few of the things that I always come back to is like, whatever you want to create, be okay to fail first. Because everybody who is successful failed first. And maybe, yes, there's that like 1% out there that's gonna put one episode out there and it'll explode. But most likely you're the 99%, and you have to be comfortable with the fact that you might be doing this for a few years before you become quote unquote successful at it. Because to be honest, I think success to me is more of a sense of feeling fulfilled. Like, I feel successful now, I feel successful every step along the way. But if you are starting off and you're not getting that external validation that you thought you were going to have right off the bat, that is just like a part of the process to get to where you want to go. My gosh, like, I bet so many companies out there that became huge, like these overnight successes, were actually 10 years of hard work and then something made them blow up.
Oh, yeah.
So it's really, I appreciate you saying like it is a grind and is a hustle, because nowadays we're trying to really like get out of the hustle. And I think in myself, like, I was raised by two business owners, like a family of entrepreneurs. Like, it's like you said, unrealistic to assume like if you start doing something that's a passion of yours that you can drop your 9 to 5 or drop your stream of income, because like I said, 99% of the time it won't just explode in that sense to support you financially. And it sucks that we need to always have that, but I mean, we have it for a reason. I'm glad. I don't think I really talk about this myself either. Like, a lot of people, when they see me in real life, they're like, is that the only thing you're doing? Like the podcast? I'm like, no, I'm
But I
doing
love
a
when people think
lot of
that, because I'm
things.
like, really? You think that?
I'm like, you think I'm professional enough that that's what I do? I love that.
Sometimes I lie. I'm just like, yep. Yeah, but you touched on a couple great things there that I resonate with so much. People, again, don't see on social media that back end work, right? Like, you look at like the Jay Shettys, like there were years before he like quote unquote blew up. And like you said, it is that 1% that we see that all of a sudden like a video or two goes viral, and then suddenly like they can quit their job and they can all of a sudden like have this huge following, and it seems like it happens overnight. But even people I talk to who that happens to, and I've had them on the podcast, they say it is due to a couple big videos. They were doing years before that. Like, it seems overnight, but it really isn't. And I think it's also really important to highlight that whatever you are doing on the side that might not be getting the attention and the validation, like you said, it can feel extremely lonely and extremely hard and difficult, and you're going to want to give up. But that is when I turn to bigger podcasters to get their advice, right? Or I turn to inspiration that I like to go to. So I tune into my favorite podcasts like Chris Williamson, Modern Wisdom. I, on repeat, listen to his episodes where he shares like his story starting out. He's like, for 3 years, I had laughable listenership, but I kept going because you just keep going. And he went from doing 1 episode a week to 2 episodes a week to 3 episodes a week. And then finally, like, he's huge now, right? But he's over 6 years in. And that's really important to consider. And what makes me feel so reassured and validated is listening to big people who have gone through that, or interviewing successful people on my podcast who've gone through that, or just seeking out that content to find someone who's gone through it or who gets it. And every single time what they say is that those years of feeling like no one cares, of maybe feeling a little bit isolated and lonely, maybe like losing some friends because they're like, I don't know, she's changing and we wanted her to stay the same. So, like, friends might drift. That can be a whole nother conversation, but it's all a part of it. And when you realize that that's just all a part of taking steps towards doing something cool and successful and different and something that's true to you, you're like, oh, it's supposed to feel hard. Like it's supposed to feel lonely and like difficult at times. But that's a good sign, and I should just keep going and continue to take one step in front of the other. So back to this hustle culture idea, there's of course days when I'm like, I don't know how much longer I can keep all of this up for. And I have to turn back to that inspiration, to turn back to those reminders, to remind myself like these are the hard years, but it gets easier and easier the more steps we take, if that makes sense. But I think it's also important to not burn out. And that's something I've been grappling with lately. Like I am doing a lot, and I am in New York City, and we did just go through winter. And you and I chatted offline about this in just like a separate conversation, but burnout is real too. And I think one part of this conversation should definitely emphasize the fact that we need to also take care of ourselves and take responsibility for our mental well-being and our physical well-being. And we can't do it all. That's just like realistically the truth. And so if you are balancing a 9 to 5, if you are trying to grow something on the side or just wanting to incorporate more hobbies, be sure to also prioritize rest. And one thing that I've really struggled with and am continuing to remind myself of is things don't happen overnight. And whatever progress I make today, however big or small, that's a step. That's a step towards where I want to be going, and reminding myself that that can be enough and now I can rest. Because in the beginning, when I was so eager to like make this blow up and make this a thing, and I was like, let's get listeners and all the things, I was pushing myself like too hard, and it didn't make me feel happy or successful or fulfilled. And I'm like, all right, if I'm going to have a podcast about talking about living a fulfilling life, I should probably be feeling fulfilled myself. And so finding that balance while juggling all of these different things is something that I'm really practicing. And patience is a big part of that.
I love that. We sometimes see the black and white, like the most aesthetic content, the most productive content, and this is the way we need to wake up in the morning to be successful, and this is our routine to do at night, and this is the skincare routine to have the most like best skin. Like there's black and white content out there a lot, and it's refreshing to know that we are always living in a gray area. We will be creating, and then there also might be the burnout that might creep up on us. And we realize sometimes we're not creating out of what actually is fulfilling us, but maybe is the hustle culture, the grind that we need to succeed and we need to be productive and successful and stay up all night and not get enough sleep, because I am subjected to that. I'm sure living in New York City, you become subjected to that with the grind culture that is constantly around us. And my friend put this perfectly. I had her on the podcast a few years ago, and she was the one that really was a driving force in understanding hustle culture and burnout and the importance of rest and play, because I had freshly come out of university and pulled all-nighters, didn't really make time for me, completely was actually detached from what I was learning. It's good to have that muscle to catch you in the moments of burnout. Like it's trying to teach you a lesson here to slow down, because if you push too far, all of what you're going to be creating and working on might not actually be connected with your vision. It's what everybody else wants you to do. They want you to fit in this like box of grinding until you die,
100%.
And she was like, I'm an advocate for rest and play and getting out of hustle culture, but I'm very much still in it. And I think that's perfectly what you and I are trying to express too. It's like we are people who are doing it, we're doing the thing without really understanding how to like completely have that balance. That balance is like a constant circle where you're like, oh, I'm balanced. And then it's like, oh no, I slipped off. And then, oh, I'm balanced. And then I'm slipped off. And I love these conversations because I think when I originally was trying to understand about burnout, I'm like, oh, this is a thing to never burn out ever again.
I'm really glad that we're being open about talking about this, because I think so many people are feeling it, but maybe don't even realize that they are feeling it. Because I think our society just kind of glamorizes being busy and working late, and after that, going out late and drinking late and doing it all, right? It's like, when are you resting? And are you giving yourself that mental detox, that time away to really reset, and just that time daily to check in with yourself and to do the things that you need to nourish your body and nourish your mind. And I think there's so many people who you hear it all the time, like, I don't have time for that. I can't meditate. I can't wake up earlier. Like, I need that rest. I can't, incorporate, I can't pause and do affirmations or meditations in the middle of the day. Like, are you kidding? Like, there's too much to do. Like, I just need to continue checking things off my checklist. And I 100% relate to that. But I recently had a medical doctor on the podcast. Her name is Dr. Sabina. It was such a great episode and truly what I really, really needed in that period in my life. And we talked a lot about burnout. And she ultimately works with high achievers to bridge the gap between their success, but why they're not actually feeling fulfilled by it. And it's because they're addicted to that productivity, like you said, or have that productivity anxiety. We think that the answer when we don't feel that fulfillment is to just do more, because we're like, oh, maybe if I do more, if I check off that next thing, then I'll feel like at peace. But really what we're doing is just feeding that addiction within us to do more. But what we truly need is slowing down and rest. And it can feel really freaking uncomfortable because there's so much, because there's a voice within us that's saying there's so much to do. Like, I could be productive right now. I could be working on the podcast. I could be getting that work task done. I could be getting my chores out of the way. But no, another guest I had in the podcast, a productivity expert, Brian Cullum, he shared the rest is the work. And I literally wrote it down, and now I look at it every single day because the rest is the work. We need rest. If we're not giving ourselves rest, if we're not letting ourselves regroup and doing the mental nourishment and physical nourishment that our bodies need to keep going, not only is the work that we do not going to feel fulfilling, but we're going to feel so detached from it. And we are going to get to a point of burnout where we probably do just want to quit. We're not going to have that long-term sustainability to stay at it for a couple of years, because it's like you're so go in the beginning and you don't allow yourself to find that balance. And so being in New York City, one big thing that I constantly have to remind myself of is I don't like the late night culture. I don't like the hustle culture, to be honest. Like, I'm very yoga instructor in bed by 9 p.m., like talking about self-improvement topics on my podcast over here. Like, it's kind of hilarious that I work at a hedge fund, but like, hey, we can be a little Hannah Montana. Like, that can be fun.
Yeah.
But I don't really like to go out late at night with friends, like, which is what everyone does in New York City. Like, dinner starts at 9 p.m. I'm like, that's my bedtime.
I'm in bed.
Literally. And I have to remind myself, like, this work hard, play hard culture isn't for me. And so I need to constantly check in with myself to remind myself what serves me. What does my body and my soul need today? Like, and that might look very different. It does look very different than what all my friends are doing. And that comparison can feel real and difficult at times. Like, I'm not doing enough. But it's not that I'm not doing enough. It's that I'm living in alignment with my values. I'm not letting other people's values and what they think is important impact what I've learned that I need. And often that's rest. And often that's not going out because I do want to take steps to grow the podcast. It's always checking in and asking, how do I find that balance? What do I need? And yeah, in the past couple months, like, I feel like I have been leaning too much into doing. And that's why I think there's great change around the corner, because I recognize, like, I do need a change to keep it this long term. Like I can't, just keep spreading myself so thin for so long. So then you make a pivot, like, not necessarily doing anything drastic, but asking, like, what is it in my life that's where I'm feeling this resistance? What's really contributing to my burnout? Is it something that I can look to change?
Yeah. I also find for myself, when I get into cycles of burnout, I ask myself, what's in my control that I can just put down right now? Mm-hmm. Because sometimes they're like, no, I need to do this. I have to do this. People are doing it. Like, you have a choice. We have a choice to slow down. We have a choice to, put something on pause. I even tell my friends who are in 9 to 5, you have sick days. Take them. Take a sick day,
Yeah.
You have 15
But
days
people
off.
like don't want to,
People don't want to
because they're
because
like,
they
oh, but
feel
how's it gonna
guilty.
look? What are they gonna think of me? And it's like,
Yeah. Oh my
who
goodness.
think
Who
what of you?
cares?
Like, who even cares?
Oh my gosh. And you know what? We're going to close this off soon, but my friend who works in a 9 to 5, recently, it's pretty tragic. She had her manager pass away abruptly. He was skiing, like still don't know what happened. And she's like, you know what? This really makes me wake up to my 9 to 5 because this guy's been working here for so long and I bet he's going to be replaced in a week. It is important to always, like you said, tune back into your values, figure out really what are you working so hard for? Really. I ask myself sometimes, what am I working so hard for making money? What do I want the money to just look at it or do I want to do things? And
Yeah,
I don't want to put off like doing things for fun
absolutely.
and for rest.
I think the money, at least personally, what I feel, especially when well, there's a couple things. Extremely tragic about your friend's boss, and just a huge reminder that life is so short. And whenever I hear
Yeah.
something like that, I'm just like, life is too short to care about these small insignificant things that we spend so much headspace worrying about. Like, do what you need without worrying about what other people think. Second point I really want to touch on, when we are in that state of burnout, it's also easy to want to make drastic and huge changes tomorrow, like to drop everything today, right? Because we just need that we need that release and feeling of peace and comfort immediately. But one thing I've had to remind myself of is no, pump the brakes, give yourself like rest, of course, like today, this week, this weekend, whatever, to get into a good mental space to actually have that clarity to be able to make those decisions from a sound piece of from a healthy standpoint, if that makes sense, not from that desperate and drastic need and desperation to make a change. Because part of me literally was like, should I just move to Europe? I think we literally talked about that in our last conversation. Like, I was ready to move
Literally
to Europe.
catch
And then I
us in
started like
a year and both of us are gonna like meet each other in Europe. We're like, well,
I
it
know. And it
happened.
will happen one day. And I do want that for myself in the future. But I also have reminded myself, or I pumped the brakes and I was like, okay, that was a bit drastic. It's not the best years for me to do that. I think too, with the feeling stuck in a career or a job. And if anyone listening is feeling that way, because in our 20s, like I think a lot of us feel like, well, I can't leave. Like this is stable. It's going to like give me income and all the things. So again, coming back to that, start something on the side, see where it goes, take steps every day, because it not only puts less pressure on feeling fulfillment and making your 9 to 5 everything. I think we're looking for that job that's going to really fulfill us, but that's okay if it's things outside of work that really fulfill you. And then if you get to a point where you're like, it's like, yes, this is my like stable income in my 9 to 5, but I'm kind of broaching this burnout and like juggling all this is really unsustainable. Get curious as to other vehicles of how you can financially sustain your life, right? Because if that's the only reason you're staying in the job, like there are other options. And I think we need to, again, check in with ourselves, ask like, why can't I make these changes? And why can't I pursue this thing and then like find a vehicle to financially sustain myself? Like you can find that balance and it doesn't have to look exactly like what your life looks like right now. And you don't have to make that decision tomorrow for what the change needs to be.
I'm so happy that we had this conversation. I feel like it's currently at 8:57, and speaking of work, both of us need to hop into our
I
jobs very
know.
soon.
I was like 30-minute chat. I knew it was going to be like an hour.
Ugh,
But it's been
I knew it, but I was like, I need to check the clock because I'm not making either one of us in trouble.
yeah, no,
But
Bianca, shut me up. I can just ramble about this all
ugh,
day, clearly.
we'll probably just FaceTime each other again and
I
chat
know.
about
We're like,
it.
there's gonna be a part
We're gonna
two.
meet each other in Europe. Let's be
Don't miss
honest.
it.
Well, thank you so much. I'm so happy that you came on the podcast and shared this because I think I really needed it. I think, like you said, a lot of people right now need it as we're getting into like quarter 2 and all those fiscal quarters. A lot of us didn't take advantage of the winter to rest because we're not able to. And I think more than ever, some people are like, we're getting really excited about spring coming, but there's also that like exhausted feeling that so many of us are dealing with. So if this is a reminder for anybody listening to spend the next week resting, and it's okay to say no to your plans and just do what makes your little heart happy, this is your sign. Camille and I are both telling you rest because we need it.
Absolutely.
Rest is, what is it? Rest is the work. Rest is the work.
Yeah. Preach.
Thank you all for listening. Thank you so much, Camille, for being on the podcast. And I'll see you all next week.
See you all soon. Thanks so much, Camille.